Hello, welcome to my channel. Today, I'll be going over my reasoning why I believe Jiaoqiu isn't bad in his current state, and nowhere as bad as doomposters are making him out to be. I will be going over a few things today, so feel free to skip the parts you're not interested in. Firstly, the history of Jiaoqiu and his kit changes for context on why people are pissed, the reason people are complaining now, how he is outside of Acheron teams, and if his buffs are really that mediocre compared to Pela and Guinaifen, and lastly, when would you want to use them, or Nihility characters in general? Besides, if you like them, then just go for them. This is going to be some nerdy stuff, so feel free to skip this part if you're not interested. Now, the reason why I'm doing this is due to the doom posting I've seen online, whether on YouTube or Reddit, and perhaps I can stop some of this doom posting because it really ruins the enjoyment of a character for many people. This is of course my opinion, but I will put out the facts so you can make your own informed decision if you want to pull them or not. I will be excluding Acheron because he is Acheron's best teammate, and I don't believe I've seen anybody argue that. So I'll start with his history because I feel like context is really important to why people are disappointed and or doom posting. So excluding his name, I believe Jiaoqiu and his kit were actually leaked near December by Dim. Besides this unknown debuff, something you may notice is that the mechanism called Aura would heal allies, making him a hybrid Nihility and Abundance character. Sounds pretty OP. Not much will happen until late March, where leaks of Jiaoqiu appear again, and this time by HomDG Cat. These early leaks of a more detailed kit, usually by HomDG Cat, are always pretty accurate in regards to the general concepts of the kit. During that time, we got a bit more detail, and now I can assume a few more things. That being that he would be a Nihility character that has defense shred and healing capabilities. Hearing that alone, again, sounds pretty OP. As we have seen, role compression is really dang strong in a game with a limited team size. So let's look at Huohuo, who isn't the best sustained but a great unit due to said role compression. But rather than say a 70-30 split of sustain and healing, a 70-30 split of a damage support and sustain would have been great for many types of players, but especially low cycle mod clears. But as you may have seen, he doesn't heal anymore, which was a really big draw of him before his official kit was released. After which, he now has to fight for his position with the likes of Guinaifen and Pela. So now, you know the context on why some people were disappointed in this kit when it was released. Just in case you skipped the last part, it's because he can't heal. We can now go into why I think a lot more people are doom posting, with that being partially due to the changes in his kit, and I'll go over it if I think it's justified. Future Q here. Whilst making this video, I was informed that version 5 was released and that the changes all. I'll explain why it's actually not as bad as it seems. So, alone in a vacuum, it is horrible. But this is because people are not taking into account his passive where new enemies will get max stacks of Ashen Roast. So essentially, the main change is that you have to keep up Ashen Roast on enemies now via skills or basics. Unlike before, where you just needed the field and you could just literally do nothing and everybody would eventually get max stacks. This also doesn't really make him less flexible either because you're going to skill anyway as to get 100% ult uptime. Back to the video. While doing research, aka just browsing the Jiaoqiu Reddit, it honestly just made me marstruck. It's just an echo chamber there with most people saying he sucks with bad or no reasoning at all. And then the people saying he's not bad, well, they just got downvoted. I was going to talk about why they were upset, like if they had reasoning such as it was just going to be a Pela or Guinaifen side grade or slight upgrade, and I could explain why that isn't the case. But me just talking about their points is actually just me spreading misinformation. But just for some examples, he has been constantly getting nerfed. E6 Guinaifen is better than him. He is like Daya or Sijuin from Genshin, and the best one, he sucks. Zero explanation. Or better yet, I'm quitting because he sucks, and Hoyo hates men. Like, no. None of these are true. Like, Aventuring. I will say that a valid argument that I did see was that he's lacking defense shred. My only issue with that is that vulnerability is better than defense shred, all the way until defense shred has around 85%. So yeah. I don't think many of the people even understand what the nerfs were and are just jumping on the bandwagon. In my opinion, the reason why people are doom posting is because of a mix of being uninformed, paired with didn't read, along with 2 buffs, 1 minor nerf, and 1 major nerf, caused their entire community to just erupt in rage. Wait, 2 buffs? I thought you only got nerfs! Yeah, let me explain. I will simplify all the changes and you can decide how bad they actually were and if there were even buffs or nerfs at all. For the skill, it was a 180-90 blast, and for a comparison, Himiko is a 280, so it has the same motion values, are pretty good. But with version 3, it was changed to 150-90 ratio, which is a 9% damage decrease in blast. Still pretty good, but as you can see, slight nerf. For his talent, it no longer has if ult field is up, enemy effect hit rate is reduced by 30%, and they take additional fire damage equal to 150 of JQ's attack at the start of their turn. This, while not being considered a dot, effectively acted like one. This was replaced with Ashen Roast now being considered a 180% dot, and at the start of battle, immediately gained 15 energy. I cannot emphasize how good this change is. This is an amazing change. This means he can turn one ult, which is something only Pela can do if she has Resolution Light Cone and uses her technique on the enemy. While Silverwolf can do it if there's Ruan Mei Light Cone paired with Tutorial Light Cone and you somehow hit the defense bug after you use her technique. Jiaoqiu with just an EO rope can hit the ult right off the rip. I will go on later to explain why he is so much better than alternatives because it's consistent and permanent uptime due to how his kit works and how it works with multi-wave content which none of the other characters can do. Now to what people consider the nail in the coffin, we got the ult. From version 1 to 2, the ult had a 200% multiplier, and the field gave a 15% more ult vulnerability. For comparison, the other AoE ults and their multipliers, Pela has 100%, Guinaifen 120, Serval 180, and Jinyuan and Herta were at 200. Yeah, let that sink in for a second. Just for reference, against 5 enemies with a Ruan Mei, my Herta is hitting upwards of 200k in pure fiction while my DPS Pela is hitting around 60k. As you could assume, people noticed the absurd multiplier, and with beta testers getting their hands on Jiaoqiu, a few of them made him into a full DPS against various endgame lineups, and he honestly performed pretty well. A bit too well. And as such, he subsequently got his damage multiplier nerf in version 3, going from 200 to 100. Do I think it was deserved? Honestly, yes, but I feel like they could increase this multiplier just a bit, just to be higher than Pela. But if you think about it, a 1000% multiplier against 5 targets is really strong. Oh, I forgot to mention, it's a 100 cost ult. It was very strong. With this change, his potential as a meme hypercarry died, but his debuffing ability stayed the same with his field lasting 3 turns. As you can see, these changes just affected his personal damage and didn't even affect his damage amplification, which is like the main draw. So the fact that people are unironically complaining and saying he's worse than our 4-star options is actually insane. So now the question arises, how is he outside of Acheron teams, and are his buffs really that mediocre compared to Pela and Guinaifen? And is he really just a side grade or just a slight upgrade? I will be dividing this section into 2 parts, the first being simple math to see the raw damage amplification, and then the practical reasons on why he's much better than 4-star Nihilities that people completely ignore or just don't know about. Also, this is featuring Ruan Mei. Starting with the simple math, how does the damage amplification compare with Guinaifen and Pela? I will be using these fake numbers for simplicity's sake and then just adding the debuffs into the calculator and to see the change in damage. By the way, the self stats don't matter unless we add a harmony unit. I also will not be going in detail for his E1, but assuming you get no damage percent buffs besides your elemental orb, this is around a 29% damage increase. Also, I did this with Ruan Mei calculations too. 2 things to note before I get into it though. My previous video does have when his stacks are lower, but after seeing this gameplay, he basically will always have 5 stacks on all enemies. Also, I will add Ruan Mei because I saw many people saying just get Ruan Mei instead due to the other utilities she provides such as speed, break efficiency, and action delay, thus increasing sustaining overall damage. This I cannot argue against. But some people also argue to just get E2 Acheron instead of Jiaoqiu, which I'll quickly go over. Essentially, the mindset is that you can now run a Harmony, which the only 2 you should really run is either Sparkle or Brilliant due to the action advance getting more stacks. The only issue is that Jiaoqiu will be providing more stacks from what I've seen. And with Acheron generally already having lots of crit, damage bonus, and attack, she is hitting those diminishing returns. So no, you should go for Jiaoqiu rather than Acheron's E2. So now getting that out the way, let's look at the charts and see what the data shows. As we can see from a screenshot damage comparison, JQ generally speaking is only around 10% better than a 4-star counterparts. For some people, yes, this can be underwhelming, and if you don't like that, then that's perfectly fine. Interesting to note though is that Resolution somehow performs just as good as its signature Lycomb, but you will be missing that 60% effect hit rate though. But this chart is assuming that they all have 100% uptime on their max buffs, which I will touch upon later. When comparing to Ruan Mei, people are right. He does not provide as much value compared to her due to the utility Ruan Mei provides. The main thing going for JQ compared to Ruan Mei is his personal damage and his ability to be slotted into dot. I want to note though that with his E1, he performs just as good and better when ulting than Ruan Mei in regards to damage amplification alone though. So given this information, you can make your own decisions. I will now talk about these buffs in practice and not just in theory. In practice, he is much stronger compared to Guinaifen and Pela for reasons people are completely ignoring. Firstly, his uptime in his debuff is just leagues better than them both. I will compare him to Pela first. Both characters and their shreds last for 2 turns, not a big deal, but the only way to extend this debuff is by applying it again, and the only way Pela can is if she ults. But even for high speed Pela against very high speed endgame bosses with like 195 speed, your defense shred would generally run out even if you try to time it right. JQ on the other hand can apply this debuff with his skill alone like Guinaifen, and his ult is a field and not a debuff, causing enemies to gain stacks on their turn. This essentially grants a 100% uptime because it keeps refreshing, unless he dies of course, while Pela in endgame content cannot consistently do this. Next will be multi-wave content and stack generation. As we know, JQ with his energy trace combined with his ult field means that enemies would always have 5 stacks, where you only really need to build up the stacks the first time. This includes when the enemies enter the field due to the bonus ability series sent, where new enemies will match the highest amount of Ashen Rose. When compared to Guinaifen, she has to build up the stacks with every new subsequent enemy, so rather than a constant 48% damage increase, it's actually much lower. Oh yeah, and it transfers between the waves, so he is great in pure fiction, and for bosses that summon a lot of stuff too. TLDR, it's actually not the raw amplification which makes him so good, but rather the uptime that he has. And with E1, he is comparable if not better than Ruan Mei damage wise. Also, he does damage which Ruan Mei cannot do. Not really, besides break. So, lastly, why would you even want to use a Nihility character over a Harmony character? And I'll just use a simple analogy and use a square. So if we imagine damage as the volume of the square, we'd obviously want to maximize the damage. So if the sides were attack, crit rate crit damage, defense, and defense shred / vulnerability, what would provide us the highest value? So let's just imagine each side with a value of 4. So 4 times 4 times 4 times 4 is 256. But if you could distribute 4 points, where would you add it? Doing 8 times 4 times 4 times 4, you get 512. If you were to distribute it evenly, if you were to do 5 to the 4th power, you'll get 615, which is clearly better than if you were to focus everything on just one stat. So essentially, as long as we keep all the sides balanced, it will provide us the highest amount of damage. For example, many teams and characters have a lot of buffs generally, and we'll use a theoretical Jingliu for example. She has 5000 attack, 250 crit, 38.8 damage bonus. And as we can see, 0 debuffs. Adding Bronya, who's her best teammate, adds everything beside debuffs, and going by our analogy, we would want to invest in debuffs due to the diminishing return. So the question is, why is buffing generally better than debuffing? So this is due to 2 reasons. 1, lack of uptime, which Nihility generally struggles with, but this is something JQ completely fixes. And number 2, the Harmony buffs literally provide more due to the sheer amount our characters give. So, in theory, if all of our buffers lost just say 25% of their buffs, from a numerical standpoint, so Ruan Mei, rather than providing 68% damage bonus and going to 51%, I bet a lot of people will be more interested in debuffers. So, after all of this, I hope you can understand why I don't believe he's bad at all. And it's because he essentially fixes the Nihility character's uptime issue. But you should make your own decisions after hearing all of this because yes, even though I'm trying to provide facts, it is still pretty opinionated. And that's that. Thank you for watching and I hope you learned something from this. Bye!